think the necessary power of God, the word manifest, and it's a lovely word, because basically Jesus didn't say go out and tackle the world in your own strength, in your own wisdom, in your own understanding, in your own motivation. He never told us to do any of those, did he, Henry?
No.
Yet, that I've got to tell you that there, just judging from the thousands of emails I get a week, people are so hungry for a word from the Lord and for His perspective on what's going on. And I want to ask you this. You and I have known each other for a long time, and I remember talking to you, maybe a decade ago, 14 years ago, about some of the military guys you were talking about, and I think this is critical. I want you to address the attitude. You know that the whole country has changed, and this will take us into what you were teaching in, when you were at your Bible school class seminar. But would you share? There's an attitude now. Jesus is. I don't know if you're up to speed on this, but Jesus has been kicked out of the armed services. In some cases, you can be court-martialed for sharing your faith. If you're a Christian, if you're a Muslim, you get promoted, and that's not a cynical statement. That just happens to be fact. The attitude
it's a fact. I hear it all the time.
Yeah. And would you share the vision? Only that part that you mentioned to me when we spoke the other night, because I think it's critical. America is standing as a naked emperor, pretending that we've got all of these clothes on, and without the Lord, we who build a house, we build it in vain. And so will you share that whole thing? Because I think that's one of the most critical things that I've heard. And I'm trying to be sensitive to hearing, your perspective. God showed you that years and years ago before it even came to pass. So you know the incident I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I know very well. The vision that he gave me, we still had the Volkswagen van that I died in. So it was... It would have been back in about 1985, 86 that I had this vision. In the vision, an angel came to me and said, now I want you to load your wife and your children up in the van, and I want you to go out Highway 26 up onto Mount Hood to Government Camp. When you come to Government Camp, isn't it interesting, Government Camp, there literally is a government camp up there. And when you come to Government Camp, stay on Highway 26 and go 5 miles to the 10th. 5 miles to the 10th. There will be a pull-off on the right, a parking area. Park. There will be a switchbacking path, goes down into a canyon. You lead the way, have your children follow you, and your wife follow them. Have her bring up the rear. Okay, so the vision changes then, and we're in the van, and we're heading up, and here's Government Camp, and I had told my children that, and at that time, my son, Peter, was, I think, about 6 or 7 years old. I forget exactly how old he was in the vision, but he was standing on the floorboard behind my seat, and he was looking, and he said, Daddy, there's Government Camp. And I said, yeah, and he says, what will that number read when we go 5 miles? And I told him what it will be when we hit 5 miles on the milometer. And so he's looking by me, and he's watching, and he's going to tell me when that number comes up. And so he's watching real close, and he said, we must be getting close, Daddy. We're getting close. It's the third, number 3 number is 4. And it's 9 something, and I says, yeah, I know. And he said, oh, okay, it just turned 5. It just turned that 5, that number. And I said, yes, and here's the pull-off. And we pull off, and we head down into this canyon, down a switchbacking trail, and we get into a little area that kind of levels off down below. And here, standing there, is a British butler with full tuxedo, top hat, and long-tailed jacket. And he's got a towel holding his left arm with a white towel over it. And he says, as we come out into the clearing of this level spot, he says in his British accent, he says, "Now then, you've arrived. Follow me." And we follow him, and we go across this level area, and we start down another grade. And as we start down that grade, following the butler, I can see there are 12 chairs. There are 60 chairs, 5 rows of 12 chairs each. And that's interesting. And I see down there standing is a senator and a general, a 4-star general. And we get down there, and the butler introduces me to the senator who's talking to the general. And the senator says, "Oh, yes." He says, "You're the family we've been hearing about." And I turn and greet him, and then I greet the general. And it seems like in the vision I already know the general. And after that, the butler seats my wife and my children, and I'm standing there with the general and the senator, and the butler pulls a 2-way radio out from under the white towel on his left arm and utters some words, and here comes a big double-bladed helicopter right over the ridge, over the canyon, and it's carrying a United Nations color blue, like a construction office. You see a contractor's office sit out on a construction site, and it's on wheels, and it has a door, and it has a flap that can open up where you can lay out blueprints and things like that, kind of a portable table that folds off the wall, and an opening inside, and people can communicate with the office that way. Well, that's what it was, but of course the flap was closed and the door was closed. And the helicopter very carefully, gently lets down this construction office in the area of the level area of the clearing that we had walked out of off the switchback path. He lets it down very carefully there, and the cable releases, and away goes the helicopter. The butler goes up there and opens the door of the construction office. And out steps Prince Charles. And Prince Charles is dressed in an African-looking safari type of khaki, short cut-off khaki pants and shirt, short-sleeve shirt. He's got the heavy-rimmed hat on, the big hat on that you wear, almost like a hard hat, only large rims like they always wore back in the days of the movies of Tarzan, and that, when these people wore them. He's like that, and he's coming down down the grade with the butler. And the Senator General and I are standing there, and as he's coming down the grade, I see his face, and I can see Prince Charles' face is all red, and his eyes are red, and I thought, wow, he has really been crying. Something is wrong. And here he comes up to us with the butler, and he introduces me to the general. He introduces Charles to the general. The senator seemed to know him, and then he turns and introduces him to me, Charles to me. And Charles says the same thing that the other man said to me. "Oh, yes," he says, "you're the family that I've heard about. I have a message for you today. Thank you for coming. Please take heed. Be seated, would you all?" And with that, we were sit down, and I sit down at the end of the front row with my family. My wife was on the other end, way on the left, and the children were in between. And I think it was early enough that I didn't have the twins and the last 3 children, little Henry and my twins. I think I had 10 children. Yeah, I had 10 at that time. That's when that vision occurred. And, of course, we've had 3 since then. But Charles and the general began talking as they're walking up to the platform. And The general nods and goes up on the platform and sits down in the chair in the back of the platform. There's only one chair back there. Charles goes up to the microphone on the front of the platform, and he begins with these words. I want to thank you for coming today. I have a message for you. Please take heed. I must inform you that your nation is at war and that you have a battle to fight. But the saddest thing is, you must fight it without God. And with that, the 4-star general jumped up off of his chair from behind him, came over and stepped off the platform, came around right in front of Charles, and kind of put his hands on his hips, looking right up into Charles's face, and I have to say it this way because it was this way, in a very sarcastic manner, he says to Charles, we know our nation is at war, we know we have a battle to fight, but we didn't know God had anything to do with it. And with that, Charles raises his right hand, which is so unlike a British person to gesture, but he raises his right hand and comes pointing right down in a sweeping motion into the face of the 4-star general and says these words, and sir, that is your mistake. And with that, the general and Charles are arguing why God doesn't or shouldn't or should have something to do with it. And while they're arguing, I'm watching, everybody is listening to this argument. All of a sudden I see a motion off to our left, off to their right. It's a massive green frog, a desert frog, and I've always said it from way back in the 80s, a desert frog. Where is our problem today? Isn't it coming out of the desert? A massive desert frog. In Arizona, when the monsoons hit, these frogs are out croaking all over the place, and some of them are 8 to 9 inches across their back, not in circumference, just across their back. Makes you wonder where they appear from. Before that rain comes, you couldn't find one for anything. Well, they soak down in the mud, down in the pools and the puddles, and they go under the mud and hibernate until the next big rainstorm, and then they work their way out and come forward. Africa has the same kind of frogs. Well, here's this massive green frog, and what caught my attention was it quickly lifted its head, filling the air sac under its chin, getting ready to what we would say croaking, make a croaking sound. But when I saw that air sac, that dark green color turning bright light yellow, terror came over me. And I thought, if that frog opens its mouth and speaks out or croaks out, we're all dead. And I wanted to jump up and tell Charles and the general because they were the closest to it, but I didn't want to interrupt. But my wife and my children all were close to it in that direction. I was the furthest away, and the senator and I were the furthest away, and the butler who stood at our right hand. And I wanted to interrupt, but I didn't. And I wanted to jump up and say, let's get out of here. If that frog croaks, we're all dead. And then, as I saw that frog's mouth opened. This white vapor came out of its mouth. It enveloped, covered Charles and the general, and it was coming our way when the whole vision changed. And all of a sudden, there I was standing right in Trafalgar Square in London. And as I'm looking down across Trafalgar Square, I look up and I see a massive military in the heavens. Massive military of war machines and soldiers. And the soldiers had these strange-looking googie eyes like big goggles and snooty mouth or nose and strange-looking like a locust of the desert chess. And when I described that at that time, we were at the battle. We were battling Afghanistan. Russia was battling Afghanistan, trying to take it over, and we were supporting the rebels who are now using the instruments of war that we gave them on us and our men. But we won't go there. But anyhow, here was this massive military standing in the heavens, and these people come running out of every office and every building in Trafalgar Square, which is the heart of London, in their occupational uniforms, even welders with the welder hat on, and nurses with their uniforms, and doctors with their stethoscopes and all this, and postmen with their uniforms, and all this come running out into that massive square, pointing at that army. They saw that army in the heavens. They saw how great and powerful it was, but they pointed at it, laughing and mocking and saying, "We're not afraid of you. You won't hurt us. You can't hurt us." And you know, I tell you, Steve, I tremble because that army was Russian. That army was Russian troops. It was Russian war machine. The general that stood there in the heavens, that all of a sudden I saw fury come up in his face, and I saw him bring up both fists in a sweeping up motion, and he declared, "Present arms, aim, fire." And these that had these strange uniforms, that a man that had just come back from over in working with the Afghan people working against Russia, told me that the kind of uniforms we had of chemical warfare for the Afghan people were no good, because the chemicals that Russia had literally turned their so-called chemical protection uniforms into just kind of slime on their bodies, was of no value whatsoever. And he said, the Russians have these googie-looking eye uniforms, they have these snooty noses, and this strange locust-looking chest that you're talking about, rib-looking chest that you described, are the different filtration systems that they have, and their uniforms can withstand the chemicals that they have developed and used in Afghanistan. And I saw and heard the bullets hitting the people in Trafalgar Square. They were so surprised, I could see by their reaction, they truly did not believe that Russia had any power anymore and that it would never attack. And in that vision, it attacked, and it was not beautiful. And I saw lightning, like flashes go out of this machine. This was back in the 80s. And it went into the heavens, and then I saw, of course, them firing on the earth with these multi-missile launchers. A scientist told me, you have described their laser system, which they have the power probably to knock satellites out of the air. So who knows what all technology they have, Steve, but that's the full vision right there. I think that's the one you wanted me to give.
Yeah,